Okay, welcome to the first video for this Zindi weekend's learning exercise, one of two. So the second one's going to be looking at some advanced computer vision techniques that you can use to boost your score. But for this first video, I wanted to take a step back and say, well, what if you're just beginning, right? If you don't really know what we're talking about and you want to get into this, what is computer vision? How do we get there? Is it hard? What do I need to do it? Yeah, so let's start with what computer vision is. And you've seen the challenges, so hopefully that gives you an idea, right? We're taking images and we're trying to understand them. And what's interesting with this task is that as humans, that's very easy for us. We find it no trouble at all to look at a picture and say, this is two people and a dog, and person one is holding the dog, person two is waving, there's some trees in the background. That kind of interpretation of what it is and mapping it to real life concepts is trivial for most people. But for computers, that's incredibly hard. And so we tried all sorts of different methods, and when I say we, I mean humanity, looking at specific patterns in the data to try and identify things like faces consistently, but it was quite a struggle. And then somewhere around 2011, 2012, you saw this resurgence of deep learning to tackle this kind of problem. And what deep learning is neural networks, right, with many layers. And these layers are made up of neurons. They take in data, they put out new data, and feeding through and then training back, these networks are able to learn how to interpret images. They're able to learn patterns within the images and how those patterns relate to each other, and they're able to do things like identify whether an image is a dog or a cat, but not only that, what breed is the dog, whereabouts is the cat, which pixels are cat and which pixels aren't. So some very complicated tasks built on imagery. And when we say computer vision, we mean classifying images or identifying objects within images or segmenting images, that is breaking them up into different parts, maybe people or not people, anything else related to taking in an image and turning that into useful data. And so that's what the task is. And as I said, deep learning has become the sort of default tool for solving that problem. So how do you get into it? What is it? How do you do it? Does it need a PhD in computer science and machine learning? And the answer is no. So over time, things that were very much tough new research ideas with lots of complicated maths and lots of complicated code have become more and more accessible. And one of the great things I've seen in the last few years is that you can now, as a complete beginner, in very little time, end up with something that's able to do a task like image classification at insane accuracies that wouldn't even be possible 3 years ago or 5 years ago. And those tools are so accessible now that it really doesn't take tons and tons of learning and many years of practice to be able to use them. They're available and they're quite easy to use. So it's a really great time to be getting into this field. And instead of making this video a tutorial, what we've done instead is try to collect some different ideas of how you can get into this field. So we've got a document that goes along with this, and that'll link to as many resources as we can find. But maybe I'll talk a little bit more about what your learning journey might look like and where to get help. So there's all these resources, and one thing that's worth highlighting is that not everyone learns in the same way or finds this concept the same kind of approach works for them, right? So you might be someone who doesn't care about any of the theory and you just want to get a piece of code, run that piece of code, and then start playing and modifying it. And that's a very sort of practical top-down approach. And that's really fun. I like that. So we'll link to something called FastAI. FastAI is a library, but also a course run by some very cool people out of the University of San Francisco. They're really good at pushing the cutting edge and making that accessible. The library makes a lot of things very easy that were historically quite hard. You had to do them yourself. So that's a great place to start if you want to just dive into code and mess around and get really good results really quickly. I'd highly recommend it. That course I found super useful. I did some of it myself. And even if you've already tried to study those concepts before, it frames them in a really nice way. So that's a path that I highly recommend. But for others of you, you might find that you really like to build from the maths up, as it were. And we've linked some resources in as well that start really with the theory of machine learning and deep learning. What is a neuron? How do you construct networks? And slowly builds up to building a modern day image recognition system. And that's also a fun approach, and that's got its own benefits, right? You've already become familiar with the internals, and so you might not find modifying things so intimidating. But it is hard because if you're going to go, from scratch, you're going to start running into, I need to learn linear algebra maybe, or I need to understand what this maths is talking about. And personally, I find that that's useful, but you don't need to do that if you're not wanting to create a completely new architecture yourself, or become a machine learning researcher. If you're trying to just be a practitioner, that is someone who uses these as tools, you can get an understanding of what the underlying things are doing without necessarily having to completely internalize them and be able to re-implement everything from scratch. So there's two different kinds of approaches. There's that bottom-up approach and that top-down approach. A combination of them might work for you. One or the other might appeal. So what we've done is put together a bunch of tutorials. In terms of trying this challenge and some subsequent challenges, we'll also share some starter notebooks. And these are code that I've written, or that members of the community have written, that will get you going in a given competition. So if you're completely new to all of this and not sure where to start, just taking one of those notebooks and running it, that's already a first step. That's getting you familiar with what it looks like, and then you'll find, hey, I can tweak this and get a better score. I can, change this around. I can use the same submission on a different challenge, right? Because zebra versus elephant, mask versus no mask, pothole versus no pothole, those are all the same idea. So you can take code from one, try and adapt it for another, and just treat the algorithms and things initially as building blocks. And then slowly as you go, you can dig into, what do we mean when we say a ResNet? What is that? What is this architecture? What is this learning rate that people talk about? And those are concepts that you can then explore and play with. The other good way to learn is by asking questions. So that's one thing I'm excited about with this weekend, is we're going to have office hours, 2 o'clock Saturday and Sunday. But we're also going to be trying to monitor the discussion channels. And I'd highly encourage you, if you do know what's going on, share tips. If you think you know what's going on, dive in and try and teach someone something new, because teaching also really reinforces what you know. And then if you're completely new to all of this, or you're confused about something, please ask, because that gives us a chance to try and share things that might be useful, and it gives others who are in the same position a chance to see some answers, or to see that they're not the only one completely confused about a particular topic. So we really want to make this an engaging time, and a chance for everyone to share knowledge, right? Because that's how, as a community, we grow stronger and better at these things, is we share knowledge with each other. So I'm sorry this isn't a step-by-step tutorial. We will try and share a few of those as well. But I just wanted to say that this is something that anyone can do. It's very accessible, and we're here to help and learn from each other and teach each other. So I hope you get up and running. I hope you get some entries in. Good luck on the competitions, and let's see how well we can all do together.